I'm Chad Harvey, and this is AI for the C-Suite, the show for senior leaders who know that AI matters and need to figure out what to do about it. Each episode, we dig into what it all actually means for middle market organizations, how it's changing decisions, strategy, leadership, and the nature of work. Let's get into it. I'm very excited about today's conversation because my guest isn't just building AI tools. He's rethinking how humans and AI should work together, especially in industries where mistakes aren't an option. Arya Bolurfrushan is the founder and CEO of Applied AI, which he deliberately calls the world's most boring AI company. That's not false modesty, it's strategy. Arya's team focuses on automating the critical, regulated workflows in healthcare, banking, and insurance where you can't afford hallucinations or black box decisions. Arya brings a unique lens to this work. He started at Goldman Sachs, earned his MBA at Harvard, and took a company public on the Oslo Stock Exchange at 29. Now he's based in Abu Dhabi, building AI that keeps humans in the loop in a very intentional way. We're going to dig into a question I think every leader needs to wrestle with. When AI can do so much, where do humans actually belong? Arya, welcome to AI for the C-Suite.
Well, thank you very much, Chad. It's a pleasure and honor to be here.
Very excited to get into our discussion today. So I'm going to jump right into it with something that you said to me when we were talking about this conversation a few weeks ago. You said to me that most companies are asking the wrong question about AI. And instead of asking the question, where do I put AI in my workflow? Your argument is that they should be asking, where do I put humans in an AI workflow? And that's a pretty significant inversion. I want to know what you meant by that.
Yeah, so we've been at this for a little over 4 years now. So kind of before AI was cool, and the reason I bring that up is we've been at the front lines deploying these things in mission critical industries and have seen, the realities of implementation and production, and also have made all the mistakes you can imagine, and kind of iterated very quickly on them. And we've tried to kind of incorporate those into Opus, which is the third generation of our software. And one of the things we realized is anything but business process re-engineering or reimagination is a band-aid. And the kind of limiting factor is not really technology, but the limiting factor is the human mind. When if you give somebody a blank canvas with a low code solution, the human mind just kind of recreates the old process again, right? And then we'll think about where to add an AI agent to find a local optimum to increase productivity by 20%, 30%. Where we've seen the real uptick in productivity is when you look for a global optimum, where essentially you say these legacy processes that were written in the 90s or have been kind of an amalgamation of a bunch of things, has a lot of false constraints in there that were designed for the limitations of the human. And once we reimagine it and ask the question, imagine the whole thing is AI. And where do we want to intentionally put humans that are needed for supervision, for checks, for edge cases? Then you see an increase in productivity by 10x, 15x. And it's actually a very hard process to do well. And we think, ironically, AI can also help us. We call it workflow generation. To kind of remap us onto the map of possibilities for us to begin from a different starting point.
I love that you focused and went right to the psychological component here, the human mind component. I think you said something to the effect, if we give someone a blank canvas, they're just going to reinvent what they already know.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real challenge. So when you walk into an organization, how do you get people to flip their mental model?
Yeah. So there's to be very clear-eyed about the realities, and and deliver kind of the bad news. This is what we start with.
Oh, okay, bad news up front.
But yeah, one of which is this won't necessarily succeed in a centralized fashion. So it's not IT internally that can do this. It's not management. A lot of times when we first started, every time there's an AI initiative and a big announcement for a company, the people on the front lines, the process owners, roll their eyes. Because they know this is just another management initiative who doesn't know what it is they're doing, and they have to build a workaround, on the solutions imposed on them. That's why we've seen AI adoption falter. That's why 95% of these pilots fail. So we think it's most powerful to do the reimagination at the edge of enterprise in a decentralized way, where you have the business process owner involved, the non-technical user be the one who's building these workflows and iterating on them. Once they've built consensus at the edge, only then the guardrails of IT for security, etc., are kind of instilled. So, in a way, we've seen that being most powerful is not to focus on their existing process and how they do things, but focus on what we call the intention or the job to be done. What are you really trying to accomplish here? If it's I'm trying to make sure there's no fraud in this claim. Okay, that's the intention. How you do it is secondary. How you did it before is secondary. So that initial prompt that will go into Opus is what's the job to be done, and then we append to it all of the constraints, which include the policies that the enterprise has, law, anything else that you put in, and then our large work model, which has been trained on 1.6 million workflows, will generate the first rendition, right? And says, here's how it can be done, and very clearly it will not be 100% correct, right? So, but it'll get you 80% of the way there, right? So once you look at it for the first time, you say, oh my God, all of these things that I thought I needed, I don't need, and here's where the only places that we recommend humans to be, and then you do 30 iterations to that as the process owner. Oh, you forgot about this edge case, you forgot about that, and you kind of you add to that, and after one day, you have a 90% accurate in production workflow that you test. So let's have some files that we run through it, and then what goes out. So having AI generate the first proposal lays bare to you all the kind of self-limiting beliefs that were in the functional requirements.
1.6 million workflows. That really jumped out at me in terms of the training base that you've got. What have you found as you've evolved the model? Are you finding, you gave an example, you said we run it through, we get the workflow, and 40 iterations later or so, and one full workday, we've got something that works. Have you found that time is compressing as the models learn more about how to better iterate ideal workflows based on the client?
100%. I mean, so I'll give you two answers. Number one is the marginal workflow you built within your own enterprise gets exceedingly better. So we call that kind of enterprise memory. So once your policies are uploaded and it knows how you do things, then the first one that you generate is not 80% of the way there; it's 85% of the way there, right? And then it's 90% of the way there. So the time to value will go down dramatically over time. For a new enterprise, or if you're on Opus.com as kind of a self-serve user, you will benefit from the kind of increasing number of workflows in our work knowledge graph, right? So when the 1.6 becomes 1.7, 1.8, the kind of base reality and best practices improve. And as kind of LLMs also improve, because we're LLM agnostic, you'll also see benefits there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You also said something that jumped out at me, and I want to make sure that I understand, and maybe I'm even splitting a hair here. You talked about the intention of the user and the intention of the existing workflow or process, and taking that intention and dropping it into the AI to iterate the new process. I often think about Stephen Covey 101, starting with the end in mind. What's the result?
Yes.
And it seems like starting with the intention is a flavor of that, but distinctly different. Agree, disagree?
Yeah, so, I mean, we follow the Clayton Christensen kind of approach of what's the job to be done, right? Like what is it that you're trying to really accomplish? And then what's the output that you need to accomplish that, right? So it's almost, and there's a big philosophical, thing here where, human intent and machine execution in a way, and then human checks, right? That's basically a way to think about it, where there's I'll give you a very clear example, just to kind of make this all real. One of the workflows that we began with was independent medical examinations in the U.S., where it's a mission critical kind of high cost of error workflow in the sense that there's a human life on the line, and it's usually when your insurance company refuses to pay your insurance claim, and then you sue. So the law in almost every state is they subpoena all your providers, right? You get your entire medical history in this Frankenstein document that's like 30,000 pages, and then an independent medical examiner must adjudicate whether they should pay you or not, and it's usually being litigated. So it's a pretty high cost of error. If you can't hallucinate, you can't have all these kind of risks there. And it's around a $5 billion industry, and it's a private equity and a BPO darling, because it's a cash cow, as you can imagine. And the majority of the time and the man hours spent in that industry is organizing pages. Because you can imagine, because you have to organize then summarize, and no human can summarize before they organize a 30,000 page PDF. You can't scroll up and down. You have to put all the in overall chronological order, in types, in various different. All duplicates must be removed. So on the 48 hours that it takes to have this organized and summarized, BPO firms charge you 18 to 36 cents a page. And there's about 90% accuracy. We came in, and then initially, we were doing it the old way without inverting the question, and we got great results. We were 30% faster, 30% cheaper. It was good. But then we generated the workflow from the intention of, I want to know if this insurance claim should be paid or not. That's the intention. The output is a sorted medical document with a summarization above it and medical codes. But the whole point is this person sick enough that they should stay in the hospital, or can they go back to work, right? And then what Opus did was, when it generated the workflow, it removed the organized phase. It just summarized it, right? The entire organizing of pages was a human limitation of our eyes and mental capacity to scroll up and down, right? So it went from 48 hours to 4 minutes, and it went from 36 cents a page to 1 or 2 cents a page, and it went from 90% accuracy to 95% accuracy, right? Just because humans make mistakes, you can't do 30,000 pages without making a mistake. So who pays that cost? Ultimately, all of us do in our insurance premiums. Right, so there's this global administration tax. So that's kind of why intention versus just the output is a more effective means to generate.
That's a really good example, and I appreciate you walking us through there. One of the things that I've been finding in my conversations with folks that are developing, deploying AI technology, as well as working with organizations to help accelerate their AI transformation, is what I would characterize as inherent pushback by humans against mistakes made by AI, and a greater level of grace afforded to humans that make mistakes, right, by other humans. And in the example that you just gave, I would imagine that even in an ideal situation with a human reviewer and a human organizer, there will be multiple mistakes or errors of some sort made in that final product. yet we afford that level of grace because it's a human. And I'm wondering, have you experienced any pushback if an error has been found after the fact when it's been organized and summarized by the AI? Have you found that there's any inherent pushback out there right now about this, or does the speed and the decreased cost offset that?
I think it's a very deep point. So one of the other realities and the bad news that we kind of share when we do these things is one of the blockers of adoption is sabotage. AI is scarier than other humans doing it because your livelihood is on the line. Like, people look at it as a direct threat. So they look for errors as a way to basically do a gotcha moment and have the pilot fail and say humans are better. So we've also seen pretty sophisticated sabotage in the sense of like putting, having the pages missing in the document, or white pages, so to make the AI make a mistake and then point at it and be like, that didn't work out. Which by the way is not, I understand it. It's not that malicious. It's just human nature to kind of to realize what's coming. So a way that we tackle that is, one, we call it supervised automation, where every single document has had the human review. So the kind of AI does the carbs and the human does the protein, where it's almost like you just focus on the edge cases, on the parts that require judgment, on the part that the AI has low confidence in. And this way, the human fingerprints are still on it. Someone holds liability. You have a throat to choke, in the sense of this person made the mistake. So when the kind of end user sees that, they don't see the AI is making a mistake. They see this human, this manager hadn't checked the work of the AI. So that kind of empathy is still there. But also, we are on the side that humans will stay employed, and the future is this marriage between AI and humans, and this way we keep the human relevant.
So it sounds like you've found less, I'm going to call it organizational inertia and resistance with respect to this type of sabotage than individual resistance. Is that fair? Or do you find an equal amount of individual and organizational resistance and inertia?
It goes back to one of the earlier points on, if you don't include the business process owners as part of the solution, then they see it as the solution being imposed on them. And then you see individual sabotage and kind of organizational, we call it an antibody reaction.
Love it.
that comes up. But when you actually give them agency and you give them a sense that they're building it, it's kind of the IKEA effect, where now you feel like it's your workflow. You built it. It understands you. And then we see a big decline in sabotage.
Got it. And it's your fault when the table collapses, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
It's you didn't build it well enough, or you forgot to put that screw in. Yeah.
Got it. So let me ask one other question on what you just outlined before we switch gears. I was very interested, and I think you had in our pre-call talked about mid-mile versus last-mile checking,
Yes.
and I think that's what you were just describing right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I'm interested in is, how do you insert the mid-mile versus last-mile checking in a continuous oversight model without creating new bottlenecks where the humans become those bottlenecks?
Yeah. So I realize that this is not as intuitive for a lot of listeners. So let me just we kind of use this. But the main metric is increasing human productivity, which is output per person per day. We saw when the human review was only at the end, last mile, like at the end of the workflow, AI does everything, and then the human checks. Productivity started going down sometimes because of a compound error problem, where you weren't sure where the probabilistic code made a small error, so you have to go back 36 agents to go, and you spend more time fixing than actually just doing it. Right. So the fundamental issue with agentic workflows, as you know, is probabilistic code and deterministic outcome requirements. So having the human reviews actually mid-mile, which means like in the middle of the workflow, this dance, AI works, human works, AI works, human works. You kind of reset the probabilistic drift in the middle of these workflows, and you catch the errors much earlier. So then your productivity really goes up. Now your question is very very correct, Chad, because you now have to kind of leave the workflow and wait for the human. That's also a very expensive thing because that pipeline was spun up, in the cloud, and you can't wait 4 or 5 hours. So we actually have to spin that whole pipeline back down, wait for the human input, spin it back up, run the next thing, and spin it back down, or else the cost will be kind of astronomical to have all these pipelines kind of waiting. So we actually within Opus have a system where it goes out and every human has their reviews for the day. So you're notified, it knows which human is online, which one's offline, almost like an Uber model. And then they and you add a deadline, say 4 hours, 3 hours, 2 hours for a response. And then we have a dispatch kind of engine, essentially, that will call a human at the right time.
That was very helpful, Arya. And I said we were going to shift gears, but it actually unlocked another question I want to drill into here. What you just outlined there reminded me a lot of the conversations I've had with folks regarding software development and how a lot of the coding is now moving into an automated realm, and coders are needing to become more editors of the code, right? Very different skill set. And what you just described is human checkpoints that are not necessarily in production. They are more in an editor role, for lack of a better word. Yeah. So here's my question. Are you finding that the production level skills translate fairly well to an editor role, or are there new skills that those folks are needing to learn as they become that mid-mile checkpoint?
So I will give you a quick answer, and one that we are very passionate about. Answer. So the humans are moving from a maker to a checker, to use banking terminology. We're all becoming managers, right? We're all supervisors in a way.
Everyone's in management now.
Yeah, and we're managing AI agents, right? The issue is we can't walk the halls, but we can. In that, it's a challenge of design, and the onus is on us to kind of showcase the AI recommendation in a way that the human can easily interact with it. So the training is more, how do I figure out what I'm looking at? How does the AI communicate to me what it's sure, what it's not sure, and how do I optimize the UI UX in a way where I can respond very easily and quickly. I don't have to review a 30,000 page file every time there's a checkpoint, right? That defeats the purpose. So there's an element of human computer interaction design, which we think is the singular long term thing to optimize. That's one piece. Number two. So this is. I think a very existential point on a species level, where for labor to be able to compete in a post-AI world, it needs to reprice itself or reunitize a unit of labor from time to output. Where kind of the old paradigm is, why would I pay you more if it takes you 2 hours? I'll pay you more if it takes you 2 minutes. All right. And that paradigm takes a lot of retraining.
Well, I think you just killed the legal profession.
Yeah, and then I think, by the way, that already happened in the transportation industry, right? So I do think there'll be a new breed of lawyer that will charge you by output and give you fast results. So the consumer will win, but uh, in a world of abundance, the thing that's most scarce, the only thing that may be scarce is time. Uh, and why are we unitizing? Why are we selling that? Essentially, so I think there will be a world in which you have to incentivize the increased in productivity and not penalize it. If I'm getting paid for an hour, why would I do 30 times more cases? I'll do my 3 or 4. So the productivity gains that these kind of agentic workflows unlock must be shared between the capital owners and the humans, or else I think, and that's a major retraining of not only the human in the loop but also the enterprise and the payment apparatus around that. Only when that's done properly, then I think you'll see massive increases in productivity.
So let's stick with this thread for a few moments, because I think this goes directly to something you and I had previously talked about. I wrote this down, so I'm going to quote something you said that directly pertains to your answer here. You had said to me during our prior call, if we don't share productivity gains with labor, there will be no place for capital owners to hide. And I couldn't agree more with that, quite frankly. You even referenced the idea that it took 2 world wars for us to digest the last major productivity gains from mechanization and industrialization. I think that's a pretty stark warning. And I'm bringing this up right now because I think you've outlined where the nature of productivity is going. You talked about output versus hours worked, right? And I think you can't have this conversation without a larger conversation here about what the impact is on capital owners and business leaders. And I'm interested in exploring this a little bit. I know it's not a direct takeaway maybe for folks in our audience, but this is where the puck is moving, to quote Gretzky, right? I don't think there's any question.
100%.
Yeah, we're going through a major shift, and we don't entirely know what it's going to look like on the other side.
Yeah.
So, from your point of view, you're on the front lines, you're developing this technology, you're working with a lot of folks, you're seeing the impact it's having now, you're projecting forward. What does sharing those productivity gains look like? And is this something that self-interest is going to drive, or is there another motivating factor here?
So I think we had a town hall yesterday, and I kind of walked through this with the team. I think if we don't get this right, nothing else kind of matters. Where, you know, the last 2 world wars and kind of the rise of fascism and communism was literally, if you read those books again, the alienation of labor, the surplus profit accreting to capital owners versus these are all the reasons why, you know, we had these battles these days, and we also fought over the source of the gain of productivity, which is energy and oil, right? So this gets very real very quick.
Sounds familiar. Yes.
Yeah. But in that case, with hydrocarbons and electricity, we still had minimum wage, and there was still, you know, uprisings. In this case, there's a good chance to have, you know, no wage. So, and in particular in democracies, right, you're going to have some major disruption to kind of process. And I do think it may be of interest to your audience too, because you know, on the supply side, the cost of delivery of the goods and services will go down with automation, right? So we can increase our gross margins, we can do all the good things to kind of increase efficiencies. But if no one's on the other side to buy them,
right?
So on the demand side, it doesn't matter. If prices equally drop dramatically, so, or if there's no safety, where do you sell it to? So I think it's extremely important that we get this right. And there are things that kind of block us that we got to go through, like minimum wage laws, and there's a lot of these kind of issues where we're mandating to pay people by time, and then a lot of this work goes offshore, right? So there is this kind of onshoring of knowledge work. There's 1 billion knowledge workers in the world earning 12 trillion in salary. And vast majority of that is outside the U.S. So I think if we to all folks who can and who hear this, whether you're regulators or in the private sector, public sector, figure out a way to share these gains of productivity with humans. And I think that, in fact, we may regulate ourselves into relevancy in the sense that it's not a free market. The government is still run by humans. So there's no AI representation in the regulator, right? So we could force this down, which we should do sooner rather than later.
Indeed. That's a very interesting perspective, that we can regulate ourselves into relevancy. I appreciate you taking time to unpack that and walk through that with us, because one of the things that's very clear from the history of technology and its impact on society is that when you've got a new general purpose technology, and AI, however you want to define it, is definitely a general purpose technology, it reshapes everything from the language that we use to the way that economies operate. And I don't feel that conversation is being had enough within the business community. So thank you for taking time to walk through that with me right now.
It's important.
Let's return to something a little bit more practical, less next year, next decade. Let's talk about your RISE framework. Redesign, integrate, supervise, evolve. If I'm a mid-market company, maybe I've done some AI experiments, but I haven't really transformed my operations. How does this apply? How can I use it? Where should I start? Does this work?
So I think the R we've covered in the fact that eventually you have to take the pain of business process reengineering, whether you like it or not. Right? The issue is, do you do it now or do you do it later? Everything but that is a band-aid. So you need to reimagine these SOPs and processes that you have, and not just one time, but for all of them. And what we've launched now is this enterprise digital twin, which is now, imagine walking the halls of a hybrid workforce where you can see where you can get to, and then we map your as is and have a kind of roadmap to get there. So that's the kind of R. The I is to restack your kind of thing is just way too painful. So we think an orchestration layer can sit on top of your tech stack. So essentially just integrate it with all the ERP and the various things that you currently use. And that's still, by the way, hand-to-hand combat. So that's where you'll have the most pain. But I think the idea is you do it once. You do it once, and then we call that liberation from the tyranny of point solutions.
That is a pithy little phrase. I love it.
We're working with a bank here who has 3,400 point solutions, and we're just like, can you imagine upkeeping all the credentials and all the databases? I mean, it's just so that's the I phase. The S is the kind of execution phase, which is supervised automation, where now you're just watching it work and making sure that it's auditable, transparent, it has full human supervision, so you have that reliability that you can run with it. The E for us is actually the most important. We think enterprises will become kind of self-evolving in the sense of their gain share, which is called in the old world. The existing mechanisms around RPA and a few other things are pretty brittle. I've never seen a workflow that stays the same for a year or two. Things change all the time. And then some folks say we spend more time fixing the RPA than we do doing the work, so we just do the work now. So having this kind of self-evolving workflow where it learns from the edge cases, it learns from the advancement in LLM, and you have this kind of like dynamic living enterprise that you can view and that can evolve with you, that's not so brittle and rules based, and that's how you kind of like we call this potentially the last digital transformation, because it can evolve itself now, right? Once you have all the intentions and all the policies and all the constraints, and humans in the right places, you can self-evolve, right? So and I think kind of being ready for that, where you don't have to do this again in 5 years.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating, and it begs so many questions. I could keep you here for another 2 hours. So I'll just pick one question out of the 30 that just popped into my head here, and that is, what you're describing reminds me in many ways of how easy it is now to spin up a website versus 20 years ago, right? Website in a box. And as you have enterprises, in your words, that go through the different stages and get to a point where the software and the process and the automations become self-evolving, I wonder how difficult it is going to be to have, let's say, a distribution center in a box, right? Where you've got pre-formatted, tested, battle-tested, in your language, workflows and automations that folks can either rent or just kind of plop in, almost like the pre-formatted
100%.
Website templates, right? That changes the calculus, and it removes 100%. The advantage that enterprise-scale organizations have against small 100%. Upstart, right?
I think that's very interesting. So we call that, there's two parts of the product. One is the Rewire, which is the RISE framework. We have this other part called Wire. So if you're a startup now, you can like buy back office in a box. You can buy finance workflows. You can buy your procurement. You can buy this. You can buy that, and actually be AI native from the beginning. So which I think is quite interesting, because you have more degrees of freedom, in the sense that you can really optimize this, and then you can start hiring for the right roles, right, up front, and you save on the retraining, you save on a lot of the other kind of legacy issues, which gives new companies a massive advantage that others don't have. So I think it makes the imperative for the Rewire just that much more important, where you will have a structural disadvantage if you don't, and the cost of iterating goes down dramatically. Where imagine you can launch 30 companies, right, for the cost of one in 1 year, and see which one works. So the cost of testing out in the market, the same way you can have 30 e-commerce companies for the same price as 15 years ago to build one, right? And then you just see which one works. Like, all the pieces are automated. Shopify delivery is all done.
A/B testing of company concepts.
Yeah.
Actually, even more than A/B testing, it's A through Z, right?
Crazy, right?
That is crazy. We say crazy because it's never been possible before. No. But we are seeing all kinds of things open up as possibilities now that we previously did not have within our vernacular or even access to.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Where are you seeing right now the highest level of demand come from for the type of work? You talked about the sectors that you work with, but I'm sure you're also fielding calls from other industries. So I'm interested, where are you seeing the most interest?
So we started with like the eat the frog first approach of like this, what's the hardest thing to do? And that's the highly regulated industries. So that's kind of our initial focus. If we get that right, then it's easier to do low cost of error workflows. So we're doing banking, insurance, healthcare, pharma, energy, gaming, anything where it's like the work that we depend on to go right. We are seeing some inbounds from Series A. A company that says, "Listen, I just want to do the Wire product. How do I just build the entire back office on top of Opus?" And for that, we've launched a self-serve version where these we have a full kind of API and dev site where you can kind of use it yourself. I think a challenge we have now is kind of within enterprise adoption. Is it top down? Is it bottom up? Is it side in? That is playing out. The majority of things we're seeing is pretty top down. But again, one last minor point that's just funny, and I shouldn't be saying this, is the quality of the product is much higher when it's maximally horizontal. The same way, an LLM is better at answering, a radiology question than a radiology specific model, because it knows more about, various disciplines and outperforms. So the more we have more industries in our work knowledge graph, the more best practices on business processes we learn. So the quality of the generation is going up dramatically. However, from a sales perspective, people want to buy extremely vertically. And not because the quality is better of the product, but just because the credibility is higher of like, I want to buy from somebody in my industry, in my region. So that's an interesting psychology we've seen.
That is. Well, I also think that we've been conditioned to look for things vertically as well, as opposed to horizontally.
Yeah, that's true.
You mentioned top-down versus bottom-up. I'm also, because we haven't really touched on this, but you're working in a lot of industries where there's a high level of regulation and the stakes are quite high. And we haven't really talked, other than a little bit on a side trail we took, about regulators and compliance officers. So I'm interested, how do you satisfy those two categories of folks who I would imagine are naturally skeptical of AI and what you're bringing to the table?
Yeah, so we actually call it compliance as code, where we think this can actually really, really help those folks, because in Opus Now, it actually went into production yesterday. Every single workflow is rated on how much is compliant with your policies of your enterprise. So now you can actually have recommendations how to improve it, or where you're kind of leaving policy. So the visibility of a compliance leader is now much more. Plus, when you update a policy, which happens all the time, you know which workflows are kind of inherit that policy. So in the sense that it can just update all the workflows at once with your approval. Whereas back in the day, you had to go and hunt for what work, which processes were in the business were linked to that policy, and kind of catch people who would break the speed limit. Whereas now it's like in autonomous driving, where you can't exceed that limit, right? So we see an uptick in compliance with these tools, but that still takes explanation. There's still a lot of questions around IP, data privacy, and these things which is why we offer this kind of like self-hosted solution just to appease any worries about things leaving the instance.
Got it. Okay. Arya, I want to tap into your perspective. So shifting gears slightly here a little bit, you see an awful lot, and I love talking to folks that get to see a lot inside the walls of different organizations. Mm-hmm. And I would imagine that you've seen quite a few pilot production fails, right? There's a lot of impressive demos out there that they don't survive the real world. So what is, or maybe what are some of the biggest mistakes that you have seen companies making when they try to move from a pilot to production with AI? And of course, not with your system, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think we've been very lucky with that. I think we've had over 80% of our pilots go to production. I think, so a few things I've realized is, and very early on we said this, which is why we're the world's most boring company, because we're focused on like real ROI and real results and low-hanging fruit that's measurable, quantifiable. So there's a lot of, and by the way, there was disagreement with our tech team, like, no, we shouldn't do that, we should just do software, we should be a purist. And I said, no, there needs to be, the application needs to be, have a very clear, measurable return. And so, for example, there's a lot of pilots that do enterprise search, right? it's valuable, but it's very hard to quantify the value. So the enterprise machinery of procurement and all these kind of balances, checks and balances of budget, have a hard time approving big expenses that aren't linked to direct gains. So that's one, a clear kind of ROI. Then two is just mapping out all the stakeholders where, the head of legal will have concerns, the head of finance will have concerns, the head of HR will have concerns, the CEO will have concerns. So kind of really kind of addressing all the bad news up front, right, and say here's how this is going to go wrong, right, and just be very clear about it. Lastly, I think we've touched on most of these points already, which is the risk of sabotage and the antibody reaction, how to kind of address that, having a kind of sustainable solution with business process reengineering as opposed to a Band-Aid, getting ownership from the edge of enterprise and not those in the ivory tower only. I think these are the current theses. We'll obviously make more mistakes in this current round, and our fourth version is coming out in April, which will incorporate any learnings we have this year.
Excellent. What, without giving away any secret sauce, since you mentioned your fourth version coming out in April 26, what's the biggest change or evolution from version 3 to version 4, to the extent that you're able to speak about it?
I think it's going to be quite exciting. I can't say much about it, but I will say, imagine an enterprise digital twin, where the output of every workflow is the input of another, and you can kind of, for the first time, see your enterprise.
Beautiful. That sounds pretty cool. All right. Couple other questions here as our time over the next 10, 12 minutes here starts to draw to a close. You're somebody that impresses me with the ability to look around corners, and we've already talked about one or two of the corners that you're looking around. What are some of the other corners that you're looking around, and what are you seeing either from a practical perspective or a longer-term, almost intellectual academic perspective? So something practical and something a little bit more high level.
I think I don't know how controversial you want to go here, Chad, but
let's open it up.
Let's open it up. Okay. I think there's going to be massive geopolitical changes that I think we're just seeing start. I think the first country to have it's almost like the Manhattan Project all over again. But whoever gets AGI to run a military autonomously, I think will have phenomenal power globally, and that's gonna be a big part of the next couple of years. I think this the issue that we spoke about. I think it was Elon who called it. We're in the supersonic tsunami, where I think there's going to be serious unemployment issues to worry about, which I think would cascade very quickly into meaning. A lot of us get our meaning from our work. So I think there's a big spiritual component to what happens. What do we do? And there are two ways that can go. Either we spiral into addiction and entertainment and that world, or rise into judgment and I think building the culture to get to one of those is very, very important. And what do we celebrate more in the culture? I think third, there's self-governance question that's going to come to the fore, where the previous models, from a first principles perspective, will get challenged. Even like the basis of economics is pricing scarcity, and in a world in which our productivity goes up, and if production of GDP is just number of people multiplied by the productivity, the massive increase in production will mean abundance. And then what is scarce? How do we do pricing? What is the need for money? There's kind of these very a lot of the pillars of what we built our global frameworks on have to be questioned. And I forgot where I read this, but it may have also been Elon, but he said that kind of the ultimate irony may be that to get to high universal basic income, you need maximal capitalism to get there, whereas with socialism you'll get to universal low basic income. So the ultimate irony may be that to have the socialist dream materialize, the answer was maximal capitalism, which is
the irony.
Yeah, the irony.
Oh God. No, I think I appreciate you laying out those different ideas, because we are at a period in time right now where I don't feel enough conversations are happening about where we're going and what the possibilities are. There's a lot of people that are very excited about the tech. There's a lot of folks that are very wrapped up in the changes as what we have experienced for the last 40, 50, 70 years in many instances comes apart at the seams. There's no doubt in my mind that we're going through a transition period. This is, to use construction terminology, an interstitial space. It is the space between. And folks like you are working very diligently to invent the future. And I'm wondering, based on that perspective, do you have any advice for mid-market execs that are listening right now about what they can do to help shape and invent the future as opposed to just react to it?
Yeah, I would say don't wait for adopt AI immediately. For example, one of the hospital folks that we spoke to said, why don't I just wait a few years to see who wins the race and then use that version? What's the rush? And I said, that by that point it's too late. Make the mistake now, even though it may cost you, one or two pilots or three things, but build the muscle. It's an existential imperative, and then really look to how you can reward your folks working with you to share the upside in some way, where it isn't a zero-sum game. I think that's as a mid-market manager, I think that's what I would focus on the most, and then see if you can harness the productivity gains instead of cost reduction into capacity growth, and earn much more. So there's also an element of, so that's one. Two. Make sure your kids have the right education and kind of are ready for the world to come. And that's a whole conversation that we can have afterwards. But get the next generation ready.
That's good. And for those interested in what that might look like, the episode with Brent Worrell from the American Enterprise Institute, we talk a little bit about that. He's got some opinions and some thoughts, and I think his thinking on that is sound. So thank you for your perspective, Arya.
Yeah.
Arya, if someone wants to learn more about your organization, about how they can engage with applied AI, about how they can connect with you, where should they start to look?
So opus.com is our website, opus.com, and you can email me directly at opus.com, and I'll we're very available.
Very good. As you mentioned earlier in our conversation, time is a finite resource and it may become one of the most valuable commodities out there. Your time is valuable. I appreciate you spending some of your time with us today. I really enjoyed our discussion.
Me too. Thank you very much, Chad. Take care.
All right. And for our audience, thank you for once again listening to AI for the C-Suite. If this episode was useful, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, follow us on LinkedIn, and check out AIfortheCsuite.com. Until next time, keep your algorithms running, your leadership evolving, and your AI in check. Take care.